not cutting you off, but all the people, when people I meet they claim they're religious and they go to church every single week, but then they go to pro-choice for abortion. Like they don't tie the two together. That if really a servant of God, you should be a pro-life person, not a pro-choice.
There's a variety of expressions of this thing. You know, but even there, you look at it, you got a lot of the feds obviously have been trying to cultivate right-wing terrorist outfits like Timothy McVeigh's for decades and decades and decades. Most are not authentic. Most of them are being created by the feds and run by the feds, but they do function at getting dumb white people sometimes to get recruited into something because they feel a lot of like resentment. They have a lot of ignorance of their history or intelligence operations, and then they get pulled into one or another of these controlled cells. That happens too, and I think that so far, here's my concern: is that things have been relatively stable economically for the last several decades because we've been rapaciously enjoying the benefits of the new global slave empire of globalization, extracting cheap labor from people who have to get poorer and poorer every day for their labor to stay cheap, for our Walmarts to stay full of cheap product where we don't produce things ourselves. So we become addicted to this global slave system, also just raping resources that can't benefit Africans or South Americans based on corporate powers that have taken control of our own government that killed our leaders. They've been doing this now for a long time, but it's allowed that degree of theft and murder of the what's called the third world. Like what is it? Like 1.5 billion people today still don't have access to electricity. It's ridiculous. One in Cape Central African Republic, 1 out of 10 children die unnecessarily at infancy. Right? It's just crazy. But that's been done by economic design by those who have made sure that we got too fat and decadent and lethargic to realize what the hell was going on because we were just happy that we got our shit's okay. I'm paying my bills. I got my job. My family seems to be doing okay. So I'm not going to think too much about how this is all happening, even though we don't have industry and we're not maintaining our infrastructure. I'm not going to think about it. So we allowed that type of decadence and corruption to make us dumb. Now, however, that's over now. We got a systemic breakdown, and it's going to get really bad, I think, before there's any chance of it getting better. But when things get really bad, radicalization increases massively. So a lot of the people who are currently kind of holding it together are going to be tipped in both directions. And this is where I'm very concerned that a lot of there's a lot of Christian Zionists out there like just having a hard on for the idea of like slaughtering the red heifers and ushering Solomon's temple so the Messiah can come back and we can be raptured and not feel the stress of not being able to pay our bills or living in debt. There's kind of like this nihilistic desire masquerading as a Christian feeling, but it's not really because it's just like I want to get out of this world feeling, which is pushing politics in a very bad direction. And you got Israel with a ton of nuclear warheads that they acquired illegally, largely through theft of U.S. intelligence going back to the 70s, that have the Solomon doctrine, right? Like they actually have a Solomon plan that's been talked about by Golda Meir and others, that when you feel existentially threatened, it has been a normalized military doctrine of Israel to do what Solomon did when he was being persecuted and caused the temple to collapse, killing himself and his enemies, including the United States. That's a target for the Solomon Doctrine. Just kill everybody if you feel existentially threatened. So that's a chaos factor animated by something end times religious bad that troubles me immensely. And I don't know what it would be able to be resolved easily enough if you could get a patriotic sense of self-interest on some level back in the American leadership in some way. If you all you would have to do is cut off U.S. funding and support to the bloodbath currently going on in the Middle East, or the same thing for Ukraine. Just cut it off. Cut off the funding and the support for a bunch of unreconstructed Nazis who are being used as proxies to create a world war with Russia. Just stop doing it, and the problem will be resolved. You'll be able to have a conversation about reconstruction and doing something differently. But right now, there's not a lot of that going on with Biden, and unfortunately, with a lot of the right wing groupings as well. There's a lot of this end times Benny Hinn, John Hagee crazy, that's also being kindled too. So that's a problem. Even if they're against abortion, they're still like dangerous.
I know I'm running out of time here with you, but I do want to ask,
Yeah.
how bad do you think things are going to get, and what is your level of bad of what you think may or may not occur?
Okay, I'll be straight up with you. Okay. In my study of history and my study of dynamics, social dynamics, um, we're generally we've allowed ourselves to get set up for a prolonged dark age, that will accelerate potentially very quickly into global chaos, but with a vector focused on the transatlantic zone, where the stupidity factor has achieved, like, it's the biggest spike in terms of like all cultures of the world. Um, and we could feasibly lose about 95% of the world population if you add especially a breakout of nuclear uh attacks. Whether The only hope that I see currently is sparked by certain elements of patriots within the MAGA movement orientation, but even there, it's full of problems. But that's the only type of thing that I see as viable inside of the U.S. dynamic as it stands for the moment. And globally, the only thing that I see as a game changer on a positive level is the Eurasian dynamic of Russia, China, Iran, which currently express leadership that understands the nature of the game, that are doing battle with their deep states in a much more effective manner than we have, and have created a much more viable system of political economic policies that are in greater conformity with what I recognize as being natural law. Whereas we've lost touch with that, and I see that also on the cultural level when we were talking about the types of cultural norms being promoted in the shows of Asia coming out of South Korea, China, especially, even Japan, which is all confused right now, but they still have a different ethos and a different set of moral values that are things we used to have more in common in our movies and shows back in the 40s and the 50s, like we were chatting about before. We lost that. They're for their I just see a classical renaissance of classical principles tied to economic policies that are trying to create excellence and meritocracy, with their population and with partner nations who have been abused by empire. So that gives me hope that there's a dynamic that is fit to survive morally on this earth that I hope we could learn from fast. But unfortunately, once again, even on this front, I get a little sad when I see a lot of the better Americans and Canadians who would be more inclined to want to survive and recognize the existence of these satanic conspiracies, and they're easily being weaponized by the very same CSIS, FBI, CIA, MI6 manipulations that worked to weaponize us during the Cold War. They're the same patterns, the same formulas of commie boogeymen out to get you and kill you is being like revived once more. Everything is weaponizing us against China to acquiesce to the oncoming nuclear war being set up by the U.S. military-industrial complex against China. American left, people who identify as sort of the left, are being more weaponized to support the war against Russia and the technocrats that want that. The right wing is being more weaponized to go against China. Everybody's confused and kind of supports. Well, anyway, there's a lot of very dangerous blind spots that are being capitalized upon by our enemies who don't want us thinking about the undead British Empire, who has wanted and has worked very hard to destroy both Russia and China and India and the United States for centuries. That's what we're not looking at properly right now because of our prejudices being worked on. The bad guys in movies in the West are increasingly Chinese and Russians and some combination of the two, and James Bond movies. So that's a concerning thing, I feel, though I feel hope overall that there is civilizational states operating the way that I see them operating, to fight this thing and to save humankind. But I don't know. I don't know if we have it morally within us to work with it or to go along with war.
Does it make you feel any, think differently of like, all right, where should I not be living in Canada? Should I, changing your strategy or even speaking out like you and I, what we've talked about over the last hour? I mean, we were talking offline what the organization VDARE is going through, and something like that could easily happen to you, myself, others that you've spoken with, that I've spoken with. Has it made you
Yeah.
feel differently or think
Yeah, I
differently?
mean, it's look, the way I see it, we're all in this together. I don't feel like it's anything personal. I'm looking at, bills going through the Canadian Parliament too that I could see very easily justifying the shutdown of my ability to make a living, my ability to not be in an internment camp. That's a concern, but I see the same thing happening across U.S. states. I see it happening in Europe. There's a war, there's a death cult that has declared war on life, and they're active. Currently, I do see value in fighting and saying using the platform that I have, which comes with certain responsibilities to try to help clarify certain things for people who need to understand what the minefield is. Um, do I ever have these conversations and think these thoughts of like, well, maybe a backup plan would be good if shit, if the house on fire becomes unrepairable? Yeah, yeah, I have those conversations. I look at things. I don't know how viable it is, but I wouldn't blame. I know a lot of Canadians, some Americans that I know have moved out of their countries, to Russia, to South American countries, and I don't blame them. Um, I It's not impossible that I would never do that, but right now I don't see that it's necessary that I do that at this point. But yeah, it's a legitimate thing to look at.
Where can people find you, Matt?
Sure. Yeah. So CanadianPatriot.org. Also the new Substack, CanadianPatriotReview.substack.com. RisingTideFoundation.net. I manage that with my wife Cynthia Chung. Brilliant analyst. She's doing a couple of movies right now, a film series that she's working on to help shed light on some of these dynamics from a different direction. And books. So we produce a lot of books. They're all available, easy to find on CanadianPatriot.org. And the last thing, the documentaries. So we're doing the Hidden Hand Behind UFOs that goes deep into the occult and a lot of history. We've done 2 of what will be 8 episodes there that are now currently public, and people can watch those if they want to. It's crowdfunded, so if they want to, each video costs us about $5,000 to $7,000. So we're asking people to make little donations, and it goes a long way to helping us make more of these films and open the multimedia front. So yeah.
Matt, as always, thanks for coming back on and speaking with me. And thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for everything your wife Cynthia is doing. I look forward to talking to her here soon. And I look forward to more conversations with you in 24.
Absolutely, dude. All right.
Mic drop.